Maple syrup. Hey,
It's
that's it.
getting
That's what I'm
there.
doing.
It's
I
getting
don't
there.
know. I don't even write these cards down. I just pluck away. So
You're generally like
yeah,
similar to like previous versions.
it's similar-ish.
Yeah,
I've never gone back and listened to see what I actually played, but those are like the 4 or 5 chords I know, so they're probably the same.
that's what
There
you
you
got
go.
in combination.
That is why. So hey everybody, welcome, welcome, welcome. It is time for the Maple Syrup Show. It is 9 p.m. Eastern Time here in Canada, but over in Australia, it is what time, Phil?
It is noon
It is noon. We heard,
the next
uh,
day.
yeah, it's noon on Thursday.
Phil from the future is
Oh,
talking to us
future
today.
Phil. When we got on, when we pressed start, it was like bells are ringing because in Sydney, that's like apparently there's bells near where Phil lives that tell him it's noon. It's noon o'clock there. So
It is
See,
noon.
there
Yeah,
you go. So hey, buddy, how are you? I haven't seen you in
I'm
like
good.
2 years. It's been a
Yeah, it's
long
been.
time.
then yeah,
Yeah,
usually guys we see Phil probably like once or twice a year. Like not a lot because he doesn't like
Australia.
North America's a bit of a hike, but we usually see him once or twice a year. I don't think we haven't seen you at all in 2 years now.
Yeah,
So
it's been.
crazy.
Yeah, I felt a bit cut off from the whole industry a little bit because Australia's been super locked down with borders, so I haven't gone to any conventions in a long time. So
And
lovely
yet,
to be chatting.
there are a whole bunch of Phil Walker Harding games that came out
Oh yeah,
over the
I
last
think you've
few years.
been crazy productive compared to most people over the last 2 years. Most we'll get into that. We'll get into that. I think most people did the opposite of what you managed to do. So you're going to be this, oh, look what he managed. This is amazing moment.
Yeah, that's good stuff. Phil, how did you become Phil Walker Harding? Did you start off as Phil, and then did you evolve to Phil Walker, and then like your final form
This
is
is
Phil
his third
Walker
time
Harding?
evolution.
How did you
New
um,
become the
Pokemon
game
Phil.
designer that you are today? That's what we want to know.
oh, okay. Okay. Well, grew up in Australia playing games. We mostly just had all the mass market American games that came over.
Are there mass market Australian games?
So not really. There are a couple of Australian made games that kind of got into the zeitgeist a little bit, but not really. The most famous one is a game called Squatter, which is about like sheep farming.
Sure, that sounds very Australian.
Which is yeah. It's sort of like an Australian take on Monopoly with lots of
Okay.
little sheep miniatures in it. So that's kind of a thing, but not
Not
really.
really.
Mostly we're playing exactly what American kids would have been playing. But we did get some Ravensburger stuff came over in
Okay.
the 80s. So I remember playing Amazing Labyrinth and Scotland Yard in the 80s.
Right.
And instantly was like, these games are different. And
They're better.
I remember seeing the Spiel des Jahres logo on Scotland Yard and
Oh yeah,
thinking,
yeah.
what country has a board game award? What a wonderland.
What a magical place.
And chocolate.
Yeah. So I always had that, I think, in the back of my head. Then, as a lot of people do, got more into video games in my teens, like early teens. And then got back into board games sort of at university, stumbled across Settlers, Carcassonne, Lost Cities, all the standards that were out in the early 2000s, and instantly was like, this is it. This is what I always wished board games were, and they are.
And now they are, and
yeah.
you're part of it. And then did you immediately want to design games, or was it just something you kind of fell into?
Pretty much. So I used to, like, as a kid, do like as a craft project at home, I'd make board games. So like me and my brother and my cousin would just make versions of, games we played. So I guess it was always this silly thing I had in my head that was a fun thing to do. But yeah, as soon as I remember after I played Lost Cities,
Yep.
I was like, why is there no proper 3 to 4 player version of this? So I went and tried to make one like straight away.
Good for you.
So I think it was like, it didn't work. So I think yeah, it was just a natural response I had, and it was just a hobby, a silly little hobby for a while.
Sure.
But yeah,
it's funny. I was just reading this yesterday on Twitter. Somebody said, game design is usually born out of a combination of love and frustration,
That's probably true. It's
right?
usually
Whereas
either
I love
how,
Lost Cities so much that I want to play it with more than just 2 people.
yeah, how would
That's
I
the
fix
frustration
it?
part. Yeah.
Or how would I make it my version? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, oh, I would have done it this way, right?
Yeah, for sure.
I think
Quick
that's
question
even
though.
what little kids do. You know, when you're playing a game with a kid and they're like, "Let's change the rule," and
Yeah.
often
What
what
if
Yeah.
they're
it did
doing is like
this?
responding to a frustration. It's like,
Yeah,
"Let's
for sure.
make this happen." Yeah.
Can I ask quickly, what was your former job before this? I don't know if I've ever
Which
asked
one?
that. Okay, like
All
what
of them.
was I
No,
guess
all of
like
them.
what career did you leave technically?
Well, so I studied film at university, so I wanted to be a filmmaker. That sort of didn't ever eventuate because, well, reasons. There's no industry here for one, or not much of an industry. And
There's only
so,
so many Priscilla Queen of the Desert that can be made.
um, so that sort of didn't happen. And then I dabbled in lots of different little things. But then I went. So then I went to Bible college. So got a theology degree, and I worked at my church, and I'm still working at my church, but just only a day and a half a week now. So I kind of, yeah, as game design grew, I've kind of been able to massage what else the other parts of my life around it a little bit, which has been really fortunate. So yeah, I still work at my church a bit, and then game design. So it's kind of just taken over a little bit, but I do like having a mix of things.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
You need those outlets that are not
not
games
games.
sometimes.
totally.
Would you consider yourself a full-time game designer?
I think so. Yeah, like I'm uneasy. I always, yeah. It's taken me a long time to accept that is the case, but I think it technically is. Yes.
I think you're technically one of
I
those.
think as much as
You're
I think
there.
I could fill up the week if I
Yeah.
wanted to.
Yeah. It wouldn't be a stretch of the imagination, right? And so what was your first game? Your absolute first published game, and then go backwards a little bit from that and tell us about like your first serious prototype.
Yeah, cool. So the very first thing that got so I started out self-publishing. So 2006, I had a bunch of prototypes, and I was like, well, there's no Australian publisher really. I don't really know how to break into the other publishing scenes around the world yet. So there's no Kickstarter or anything like that. So I basically thought, let's just self-publish. So the very first thing I put out was a game called Archaeology, which I hand-produced 50 copies.
Nice. Please tell me you have some still.
I have one somewhere. Yeah, I do.
Okay.
I really went all out. It was not worth the effort I put into making each one, but I did it, and I sold them just online and to friends and stuff. Then I realized it was taking me like an hour a copy to make, which was ridiculous, just to put it together. So I then turned it into a card game, Archaeology, the card game, and then Z-Man picked that up.
That's right.
In 2007, I think came out 2008 or 9. So that was the first kind of thing, really. Yeah.
Yeah. So 12-ish years ago was the first published game by a not you publisher.
Yeah.
Okay.
Nice.
All right. And how many prototypes did you have before that never saw the light of day, but were playable and you'd worked on for a decent amount of time? What do you think?
It wasn't a huge amount. I'd say Archaeology was in the batch of the first probably 5
Right.
that were playable. I can think of 2 that were totally playable but just not good that I put aside. But Archaeology would have been in that first batch of ideas. But I just was itching to get it out there, So I probably, in a way, it was too early. The first version of Archaeology was earlier than most people would put a design out. But I think I actually learned a huge amount from doing it. Because I didn't have access to, sort of the industry in the sense that it's easier to tap into now. So in terms of playtesting and feedback and response and all that stuff, just putting it out proved to be really good experience.
How did you get it in front of Zev and Z-Man and all that?
So it was one of those like serendipitous moments, but there used to be this really, well, quite small game convent, the Australian Toy and Game Expo, which used to happen in this kind of regional town called Albury. And I went with my little booth one year and just had, my 50 copies of archaeology sitting there. And Zev came, he was the only international presence there.
Wow.
And for whatever reason, he was like, I'm going to go to Australia and do this little convention, which was amazing of him. And he came.
Hey, he discovered you sort of
Yeah.
in his own
Well,
way.
we'll have to ask Zev that question. Why'd you go to Australia?
That's actually
Well, it was in
an
that
question.
period. It was in that period where he was bringing over some Japanese games and some stuff that just no one else knew about.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
maybe
that
he
makes
was
sense.
thinking something like that, but
Another
it was really
market
good
to
to
tap
meet him.
into.
Yeah, Zev was good at that. Still is. Bringing in different designers from different parts of the world that aren't heavily thought of as game centric areas yet, right? So, but now we have all sorts of people from New Zealand and Australia making games, and Japan and whatever. So cool.
Is that
so
convention still
Yeah,
big
yeah.
and around? Like, is this something you'd still regularly attend?
Oh, that's too bad.
It sort of it had a really good vibe, the size it was, and then they tried to really grow it into this really big convention, and that kind of
it imploded on itself.
It imploded. Like, it worked for a few years, but it kind of
yeah.
Australia's never been able to figure out how to do a really big convention properly, I think, because our capital cities are big, but they're so far apart, you can't really get everyone in one spot very easily.
Yeah, I think people fail to understand that Australia is really, really big.
Yeah.
It's like much bigger than you think it is.
When you think about where the majority of people are on the ring
coasts,
on the outside, which is the farthest away from everybody else.
And then through the middle of it,
the
it's not
USA,
exactly hospitable.
Yeah, imagine the USA, but everyone lived in New York, Dallas, and LA.
Yeah.
That's it.
That's it.
That's kind of how it feels. Yeah.
And in the middle, there were mutant animals that tried to kill you.
Well, that's Canada.
Well,
also Australia.
There are legends, but
yeah.
So what is the convention scene like in Australia? I know there's a couple like Gold Coast and whatnot, but is it big? Is it little segregation parts?
It's sort of settled into more local conventions. Yeah. So there's a couple of smaller ones here in Sydney and Melbourne. The biggest, like, I guess the closest thing we have to a big one now would be PAX has a pretty big presence in Melbourne, and the tabletop scene there is really good. And that's kind of worked because it's part of PAX, But apart from that, it seems to be sort of settled at more regional, kind of smaller conventions, which I personally like. So
yeah. So is PAX Australia like the mecca for Australian gamers? Usually, like
it's pretty much
If they're going to travel, they'll travel for that. Okay, yeah, that makes sense. Makes a lot of sense. We're just waiting to see if things come up because we have this auto comment thing on, and coincidentally, my friend Michael just ordered Imhotep, the duel from 401 Games here in Canada.
Toronto.
Yeah, it finally came back in stock, and he loves that game so much, both versions. So there you go.
Oh, thanks, Michael.
Did that auto come up? Or
it did. I think it's the word love.
We're keep trying to figure out what the trigger words are for things.
We're trying to backwards engineer the AI on this thing. It's hilarious.
Oh, you're not controlling which ones pop up.
No control.
I do, but there's like, hey, in 3 seconds, this one will go, which is so funny. But yeah, let's say hello to everybody first. Julio Nazario's here. Yes. Brad Batchelor, Amy Bao, Michael Eamon, Adam Young. Good to see everybody here. Thanks everybody for coming to see Phil on the show. Please do ask questions. If you have any questions or comments, just stick them in the chat. We'll get to them, or the Autobot will put them up. We're going to name this Autobot Optimus Prime.
Yes, we should name the Autobot.
The Autobot is
but
Optimus
not
Prime.
Autobot.
No, it's just Optimus Prime. It's the best Autobot. Well, Bumblebee is really the best Autobot.
Yeah,
okay, so we've talked a little bit about your origin, Phil. We know where you come from. We know how you started making games. Can you tell us a little bit about your design philosophy? Like, what makes a Phil Walker Harding game a Phil Walker Harding game? Like, if your name was erased from it, what would I see that tells you, I know that's a Phil game. I know Phil made this because
feel it.
Feel it in the bones.
Well, I do kind of have a philosophy, I guess, which is I hope my games are very approachable, easy to learn, welcoming for all ages, yet still have strategic and interesting decision making. Like that's it at its broadest. But obviously we could drill down into each one of those elements. But basically, I think I've always been. I think a lot of designers start out because they're captured by heavy Euros or they're captured by space opera games or whatever. But I've always been captured by the idea of making a game that enters culture, that everyone
Right.
has on their shelf.
Right,
That
right,
has
right.
just always been to me the things board games are most amazing at. Shared cultural experiences. So kids all over the world all know how to play this game. They don't even remember being taught it, but they all know it and they all grew up on it and they all love it. I'd
Right.
like to
And they
make a
can
game
just
like
they
that.
can just play it because they know it. So do you think you've reached that goal?
Well, I don't, probably not fair to judge till I'm dead, I suppose.
Okay,
But
so
like
what we're gonna have to
100
do is you're
years
gonna have to go
later,
hire an assassin to kill
I
Phil.
feel like the average person has heard of Sushi Go. Like if there's a couple of games that they've heard of, let's say past Monopoly, right? It tends to be things like Ticket to Ride
Catan.
and Sushi Go, or like a Catan and like Carcassonne. If
Carcassonne.
maybe
Yeah.
they've heard a bit more about like the more German like Euros, right? But I would
yeah,
say
I
that,
think
yeah.
I think
Yeah.
Sushi Go's starting to get to the point where people who don't have a huge gaming connection that I meet might know it.
Right.
So I think that's pretty big. So
Yeah.
that's amazing, and that's
That's
been
a
fascinating to
big
see it grow.
step for most people,
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
right?
yeah.
Do you know how many copies of Sushi Go have been printed?
I know I haven't checked in a little while, but I know it's over 1 million sales for Sushi
Oh
Go.
my
So
gosh, that's amazing. That's awesome.
yeah,
So it is
Congratulations.
fairly ubiquitous, right?
yeah. I guess so.
Which is a great thing. That's wonderful. To go from there, Julio asks, in your game design career, what is your favorite milestone reached and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, I think what we've just been talking about is sort of one of them. Like
Yep.
having a game that's starting to become known beyond the hobby is a big deal. Another one I think that was really important to me was Imhotep being nominated for Spiel des Jahres.
Yeah.
Not that awards are, everything, but I got to go to Germany
Pretty cool
for the
though.
award ceremony. And that was just such a good experience, like to meet all my, well, not all of them, but some of my like heroes and meet the
Yeah.
German industry folks and like see how seriously they take it and how
Serious
it's
business.
yeah, and
Some
it's
of the
not
Germans are very serious.
yeah.
I will say that. That
Yeah.
actually floored me a little bit when I first met them because you think of like game design, fun, and you're like, no, this is like
This is
this is
business.
serious.
Yeah. I kind of love it though in a way. Like I love both approaches, but I love treating games almost like, this is, we are producing serious, cultural assets here. So,
Yes. I think of them
I
as
kind of
art.
love that
So
approach.
there you go. Hello to Andrew Wolf and Zakir Jaffrey. Zakir, we're going to ask you a question in a little bit because I think it relates to sort of the next topic that I personally want to talk about, which is scoring. By the way, Phil, when I asked you if you could tell a Phil Walker Harding game without it having the name on it, I play tested Gizmos with Eric before before it had the hopper. It was just like a deck of cards, and I don't know where were we at? I don't know. Were we at my house? I can't remember where we were. But Eric's like, I'm not going to tell you whose game this is because I just want you to play it. We just played it, and in the back of my head, I said, "This is like a Phil Walker Harding game," and he wouldn't tell me that it was yours as he was leaving. It's like, well, I'm not going to tell you. But of course, then we figured it out. It was so.
Wow.
Yeah, because it has. So one of the things I've noticed about your games in general, and why I like them personally, as maybe gateway games, maybe gateway plus, if you use those terms, I don't know, whatever. But approachability, in terms of your philosophy towards approachability, my thought, my line of thinking is that it comes from the scoring, that you're so good at coming up with scoring schemas that are just instantly understandable. They're not too deep, but they give a lot of depth of play. There's some broadness to them, and they are just, that makes sense. If I have more of those, I'm going to score more for that. But because of this thing, whatever's happening, because I have this other thing now, I'm going to score this way, without needing a huge reference sheet or anything. I don't think any of your games are need a big reference sheet to understand the scoring, and I think that's the real strength for me. How do you do that?
Tell us your secrets.
Well, I feel like a lot of that comes from one of probably my biggest influence when I started designing was Rainer Knizia.
Mm-hmm.
And a
Lost
big
Cities.
thing I learned from him was how scoring, like, it's interesting. People talk about scoring mechanisms and scoring schemas and all this kind of thing. And obviously that's part of game design. But I almost think of scoring as like what the thing is, right? So like you could say in Sushi Go, you have some set collection, you have some majority scoring, you have different types of scoring. But when I was designing it, I was thinking much more about,
What is a
well,
piece of sushi?
yeah, like, well,
Yeah.
pudding, like you want dessert at the end, and the more the better, right? So I often try and in a simple, my games aren't super thematic, but having scoring fused with what the object is and the scoring being part of its kind of personality is sort of how I think about scoring. So I mean, Sushi Go is a good example. So puddings obviously are about scoring at the end of the game and trying to get as much as you
Mm-hmm.
can. And then some of the other dishes are about risk reward, right? So if I get 1 or 2 sashimi, it's worth nothing. But if I get a third one, it's worth 10. That's all about, oh, this is a rare, exciting dish, and I might jackpot or I might get nothing. So I
Right.
try and think about scoring connected to the personality, I guess, of each kind of game.
I really like that. There's like a thematic resonance to the score, which then allows people to really, like I said before, I think I don't know if you were on air at the time, easily evaluate the worth of the cards in their hand or the pieces on the table, which is so critical to really understanding a game and playing it at a higher level, whether you're young or old or in between. I think that's a really interesting thing. Zakir Jaffrey asks, and I'll get to your question in a second, Brad. What rules of thumb do you follow for reining in complexity when you design? Because your games really aren't super complex, but they're so engaging and they're so easy to put on the table.
And there's
How do
good
you
depths
do
that
that?
build over time too, but it's interesting how simple they are at first.
Yeah. How do you rein that in?
Yeah, rules of thumb. So it's a tricky one because I think my brain naturally strips away complexities. So like every time I've tried to design a really heavy game, I can't. Like I literally, I don't know why, but my brain just cuts out anything that's not absolutely essential. So it's just part of the way I guess I'm wired. But a couple of things like I do kind of limit myself to like a 5-minute teach.
Okay,
Like
that's
if it
great.
takes more than 5 minutes to teach, something's up. And that's a bit arbitrary, but it's just a way for me to kind of make sure it's explainable quickly, and I think that helps scale the game down. Obviously, looking for special cases and exceptions,
Right.
like so often in games, things are there for personality or theme or for really good reasons, but if you strip everything away and look at the game skeleton, it's not actually feeding into the engine of the game in
Right.
any really meaningful way. So I will always take those out, even if it means losing a cool thematic thing.
So here's a
They're just
question.
additional
Yeah.
rules. Yeah.
Yeah. Here's a question because I'm the same way. Like I build not for necessarily efficiency, but for fluidity of play. And lately there have been some people pushing back against that idea, saying like, sometimes you can, smooth off the edges so much that you end up with like a flat stone that does nothing. Did you ever
But then you
find
could
that you
skip
go
it
too
across the
far?
pond. They don't have a good
True.
imagination.
True.
I think that's true. So like Splendor is an interesting example. So Splendor is a game which, when I read the rules and heard about, I thought, this is I'm going to absolutely love this game. This is my game. And I do like it, but I don't love it. And I think it's because I feel that with it, that it almost is too little. But I think there's two vectors here. There's like rules complexity, but there's also like the concept. And I think you need to have a like fun, exciting original concept that may be a little quirky.
Right.
That's where the life of your game comes from.
And
And
it's
then
interesting.
after you've got that, you want to present that in the simplest way,
Yeah.
Hmm.
It is interesting that you mentioned that because, again, going back to the playtest that I had of Gizmos before it was Gizmos, and before it was Gizmos. For those of you who haven't seen the game, it's got like a hopper and stuff and pieces and all this stuff that it never originally had. At least I don't think it did. I only played with a deck of cards, and when Eric showed it to me, it's like, "What are you gonna do with this?" Like it felt fine, but it was like oh, Erica, where'd you go? It's missing something. I felt, um, and you're right. There was that little bit of an edge of something that the development team at Simon put into it that elevated it beyond just that deck of cards. And it wasn't that the deck of cards was particularly, bad or anything. It was just okay. This is what it is. How come it's not more than that? And so that's a neat thing to kind of get that picture inside your brain that it was a little bit that you go for that, and then sometimes it comes back in the end. We have people, fanboying right now. Oh my God, Phil designed Sushi Go too. Is he the Steven Spielberg of game design?
I'll
Are
take
you the
that.
Steven Spielberg?
I will. Well, 80s to mid 90s Steven Spielberg. I will take.
Okay, and I mean, you were a film student, so there you go. Mike Young says Phil is one of my all-time favorite designers. He couldn't miss this show. Normally, he doesn't always come to the show,
Oh,
but
thanks,
because
Mike.
you're here, he is.
Came
Yeah, there you go. Oh, Erica, somewhat kablooey.
At least she froze on a
I
nice
smile,
smile.
right? That's what I thought. I was gonna say that. So we'll get back to Erica in a second. Brad Batchelor says, Phil, your games are so accessible. Nowadays, how are you hitting that nail on the head right off the bat? And how often are the initial designs too complex?
I think I've gotten pretty good at hitting the nail on the head. So, like, as in, usually before I've got a schmick prototype done, my brain knows, this is too much. It needs some further crafting. You kind of develop a bit of a sixth sense for how something's going to feel on the table
Yeah.
after a while. And yeah, I think my radar for complexity in those early stages is okay. But often it's when you're developing with a publisher that you'll do the further refinements in one way or the other.
So did you say
Slightly
it
more
took you like
complex.
about 10 years to get that radar going
Oh, I have no idea when it
when it kicked in?
kicked in. I couldn't tell you.
That's awesome. And then Adam Young asks, are there any themes you would never want to touch? Any you haven't touched but really want to?
Yeah, I think because I'm pretty, committed to the idea of sort of accessible play and intergenerational play, I think I pretty much sort of thought, oh, I probably won't do a war game or, a game that's just the theme will just instantly turn a huge amount of people away. Not that I'm totally against that idea, but I just think it doesn't really suit the work I'm doing. Themes. Oh, there's a lot of like, intellectual properties that would be super fun to work in. Everyone has their favorite things
What's your
that they're
favorite?
fans of. Well, a few would be. I think it's a bit of a shame there's no really great Indiana Jones game.
Yeah,
Speaking
Jay
of
and I have been
Spielberg.
fighting for that one for years. We had it. We were this close.
Really?
This
Oh,
close, Phil. Yes.
yeah.
And then we spent the next day
Is it
crying
just
when
the
it didn't happen.
licenses? Like, is the licensor just not agreeable? Like, what's the
Uh,
backstory a little bit on that
no,
one?
we had it. We had it and then they said, no, we don't want that. So I don't know.
Like, it just wasn't the
Wow.
game they were looking for? I'm always curious because licensors are so different from each other.
We don't really know. It really wasn't apparent
Okay, that's fair.
why we didn't get it in the end, but it was just like slipped through our fingers, and we were like over the moon for like a couple days, and then under the moon for the rest of it.
Can you tell
But you're
me
right,
Well, that was
Phil.
what
like
the
the
game was
He-Man
like a bit?
license bounced like 3 times.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, what our game was supposed to be? I can't.
Is
I
that
can't.
okay?
But I will tell you off air later.
Oh, did you rework it into something else, or?
No. It never came to be. So there was never really a
Ah,
game, but there was all sorts of thoughts and process, because when you go to a licensor that is that big, you have to have an idea. They want an idea of what it's going to be. So there you go.
I would
What
hope
other
so.
IPs? Yeah, right. You're working for Spin now. You know the deal. What other IPs would you want to do, Phil, other than Indiana Jones? Because you'd have to fight me for that, and I have a black belt in a couple martial arts. So
um. So I guess like most people, Indiana Jones and Star Wars were two things I watched a lot of growing up. So to work in those would be super fun.
Star Wars is really hard, like really hard
Yeah,
to get. I will say
I
that
don't
one.
even dare dream.
well,
Um,
no, Phil. I mean, now that you have a couple, like more than one product out with Buffalo, there's
it could happen. It could happen.
it could
So that'd be
happen,
one.
because
I
we've
think.
pitched for Star Wars before through them.
Yeah. Well, I feel like they're very particular about what
Sure.
games they want to have out as well. So I think that it'd be a tough one. I also have always thought, so I know there is a game based on Jim Henson's Labyrinth, but I've heard it's not particularly
There
great. And
is.
that movie
It
is
is not.
like a game,
Yeah, it is. It's like levels.
It's pretty much a game. So I just
Uh,
feel like there's something waiting to happen there. They're the first big three ones that pop into my head, I think.
Yeah. I would like to do one on I would like to do a great Dark Crystal game. We were gonna do a Farscape game. Any
that
Henson
would have
stuff.
been
I
interesting.
love
Wow.
Henson stuff. So there you
I
go.
have to say, the
Also,
cover. Oh, sorry.
no, you go.
The cover of Dice Forge, if you look really fast, always reminded me of the Dark Crystal.
Oh yes, you're right.
Totally.
Yeah. I got that.
Yeah. The other one that I just thought of is Mysterious Cities of Gold. Did you guys have that cartoon?
Oh,
Growing
I
up?
know what that is, but we didn't have it
It's
here.
familiar, but I'm not sure. I mean, we got a lot of random wacky stuff, especially even sometimes Australian and British, because it came over from like British affiliates. So
Yeah.
for example, like I grew up watching like Round the Twist and stuff like that. And
Round the
like, the only other
Twist.
people
Oh
I know
man.
are Australian.
It's true.
Oh wow, embarrassing. It was I think it was a French Japanese co-production,
Yeah,
and
that sounds
it's
right.
about these kids who go looking for the cities of gold
Hmm.
in South America, and it's amazing show for lots of reasons, but also almost is a game already. So that would be pretty cool.
It's fun.
Well, we'll see if anybody listens, and if they can get those licenses. Phil would love to make a game for you, except for Indiana Jones. You come to me for that one.
Because apparently Sven's called dibs.
Dibs. There you go. It's funny, Michael Min. I was just about to say DuckTales. I want to do the DuckTales game. Can someone do an Uncle Scrooge game? Who can fill their money bin the fastest and then go swimming in it? Right?
I was gonna say that reminds me of the Oink game, Moneybags. You just
Yes.
put a Scrooge on it and you're there.
Oh, that would
It's
work.
funny. Yeah,
That's a
it would
great
totally
idea.
work.
It's who's hiding the diamond.
So let's move on to party games, because I mentioned Buffalo, and that's who you're working with a lot recently, and some of the games that are coming up from there are like quite a departure from what we think of as a Phil Walker Harding game. So tell us about your foray into the world of party games.
Of
How's
Target.
that been?
We'll say that.
Yeah,
The world of Target.
the world of Target. How's that been for you? How did it, stretch your brain a little bit? And do you like it? And are there going to be more party games from Phil Walker Harding?
Yeah, so I think like most designers, when Codenames came out, they all went, "Ooh, uh, this is like a party game, but one where the design is so clever that, I don't know, the experience is just elevated because a real design brain kind of took the central concept and just made it really shine. And so I think that for a lot of designers made them think, oh, party games don't have to be throwaway kind of product. They can actually be, really well crafted things. And like everyone, there's lots of party games I enjoy, but I just never put myself in that category. But I think I sort of, after Codenames, I sort of challenged myself to be like, well, could I do one? What would it be? And the two things emerged from that. One is sort of like my take on a Codenames kind of word game, which ended up, it's called Platypus. It's coming out from Matago at Essen. And then, so that's my attempt at entering that kind of world of Just One is another favorite of mine. It's kind of a bit Just One. It's a bit Codenames. And then the other place my brain went is I really love A Fake Artist Goes to New York. Do you know that game?
Yes.
Yes.
Of course.
I just think that's...
It is one of the best. Yeah, it's so fun.
And, so I'm interested in that little subgenre of social deduction meets something else. Because I think social deduction, when there's an activity going on, is really fascinating. So at some point, I came up with the idea of social deduction and trivia. I don't know why. I guess I thought there's Pictionary.
You just did. Yeah.
Like Fake Ass Goes to New York is like social deduction plus Pictionary. And I thought, what about social deduction plus Trivial Pursuit? And that led to this idea of, well, how would it work? Well, the only way it would really work is what if some people knew the answer and some people didn't? And then I thought, oh, that could lead to some really fun opportunities to bluff. Anyway, so I invented this game, which started out being called One Night Ultimate Trivial Pursuit. But I knew that was just a gap. And that's what sort of became Snakes, which is out through Big Potato. The other big thing I was sort of inspired by was, I don't know if you guys have like pub trivia.
Yep.
In Canada, but it's really a big thing here. And I always enjoy it. But I realized one night we were doing some pub trivia with friends, and I realized what's fun. Like, no one actually cares, really. Like, obviously, you want to win if there's a nice prize. But the fun, I think I realized the fun is, what are the prizes like over there for pub trivia? What do you get?
There usually aren't any, to be honest.
Yeah, I was gonna say, unless it's like a paid event where it's kind of like one of those, like, we'll give you a % at the door. I don't think there's usually
I've
much of
competed
anything.
in those where it's like, basically you get double the cost of entry back. So it's like, $500 or something like that. But that's for like you pay $250 to play, right? And so it's usually for charity, right? So they're making a killing off of each table, and there's usually auctions there and stuff like that. But the pub stumper stuff is like usually just to while your time away while you're drinking, and so they want you to stay there longer so you drink more. So they play this game.
Yeah. Anyway, so I think what clicked for me is the fun part about it was it's actually sort of like a cooperative game because you're chatting with your table about what the answer is. And it's like, well, you know about music, so I'll trust you on that. And you know about this, so I'll trust you. It's almost like a little co-op experience. And the discussion about the question is the fun, for me, the fun social thing. And Snakes is pretty much just that. It's like, let's all talk about what the answer might be. And people will throw their theories in. But really, the fun is just those different ideas clashing and bouncing off each other. Yeah.
Right. It's like in, say, like... what was that, Super Fight, where who cares which monster beats the other one, or which is it a giant 3-legged monster with a guitar or a 16-handed octopus with a laser beam? Who cares if they win? It's the debate that's hilarious, right? The debate is the funny part of all those. Would Goku beat Superman, or whatever? Those types of things are interesting to talk about. So I can see that working. I haven't played it yet, so I'll have to go look it up though, because I think that's pretty funny. The idea of like making it that co-op trivia type thing.
Although it is not co-op.
Okay.
But it does. Yeah. Because so the way it works is there's two teams, the snakes know the answer to the trivia question, and the other players don't know it, and you've got to discuss and then vote on what you think the answer is. But the snakes are trying to mislead everyone.
Right.
So
So they're
you
trying to
basically have
mislead you. Yeah.
you kind of have the debate, but what's kind of fueling it is these two teams. Yeah.
Very cool. Very cool. And so that was through Big Potato, right?
Mm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're super fun to work with. Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's their whole oeuvre, right? Is let's be as fun as possible. What other stuff were you working on in the party field?
Well, I think they're the two main ones. I also am working on a fully co-op trivia game,
Okay, cool.
right?
Okay.
Because I want to try and crack this idea of can you basically almost have the pub trivia experience at home. So I'm trying to crack this idea of working as a team to answer questions, but sort of having special powers and abilities you can use to make it a bit easier for you. And then having to, like, as in lots of co-op games, discuss with your team, well, should we use our special power now? Should we save it? Is this question worth risking on or not? So bringing in all those elements to a sort of a trivia style game. So that's sort of working in the background. But I do sort of feel like I've got a limited number in me. I don't think it's like family strategy games where I feel like, oh, I'm always going to have ideas. It just feels like, well, I've maybe got 2 or 3 as a kind of detour on the way, I think.
It's very funny that you made party games during the pandemic. That is really kind of funny.
It must have, yeah.
A time when party games really can't be played that easily unless they are playable over the internet. Are any of the games, any of the party games that you've made easily playable over Zoom?
Not out of the box, but you could adapt them with some work. So they were designed pre-pandemic.
Okay.
So it's just unfortunate that they're sort of coming out, but they're sort of coming out as we open up. So maybe people will get into them.
Yeah, or at least people are willing to do smaller groups, right? So it's kind of the perfect opportunity for an excuse for like a few people to get together.
Yeah,
get a game.
Gaming pod. There you go.
Play snakes.
So, well, how many people do you need to play snakes?
Snakes is 4 to 8.
4 to 8. Oh, that's a good number though. The 8 is a nice big number. That sounds fun. Let's move on to your challenging designs. So Phil was telling me a story on email about a design he's making that is like really beyond in terms of not complexity, but just like if he manages to make it, it's going to be really cool. So why don't you tell us about it? Does it have a working title at all?
The working title is Mutations, but that's a bit lame. So when Keyforge came out,
yes.
So I've never been a big like CCG player, but I've dabbled a little bit.
Sure.
But when Keyforge came out, I was really obviously amazing, interesting concept, and that kind of made me think, is there other new ground to break in the way you present a game like that? Anyway, I remember looking through some Keyforge decks and trying to put myself in Richard Garfield's head about card design, which is probably a fruitless task. But I was kind of thinking about how we might design cards and what commonalities I saw between the cards.
Right.
And I got this idea about a way to generate like CCG cards.
Right.
Like if you could program rules about what they can and can't do and how powerful they are and what that would then cost and how they would interact. And I assume the Keyforge algorithm does that to a degree when it's generating the deck, like it has to compare cards to each other somehow. But I thought, what if there was a way to generate cards that were all awesome and playable, right? And I was just thinking about that, and then I thought, what if there was a game that did that for you,
right?
And so I thought about like transparencies could achieve this, right? So what if
I hope Zinser's listening. That's all I hope. Is John Zinser on the call? John Zinser?
At the start of the game, you have a massive stack of cards and a stack of transparencies.
Okay.
And you shuffle up the cards and you put a transparency in each one. And the combination of the transparency in the card creates
Gives you
a
this
new
new
card.
card. Yeah, I can see it
And
already in my head. That's awesome.
yeah,
like
and
an overlay. Yeah.
yeah, and so like the transparency will affect, like the rule on the transparency will affect the rule on the card in some way, and that affects the costing.
Yep.
And also what faction it belongs to. So there's a blue faction and a red faction, and sometimes they slide on top of each other to create a purple faction because the blue and the
Ooh.
purple shine through. So you never know what faction it's going to be. You never know what the rule's going to be. And so it's almost like opening a new box of Magic cards
Every
each time you
time.
play.
That's so
Yeah.
cool. And there's
But
some standard stuff
obviously,
too there, right? But it's just the variance in how those 2 or 3 pieces connect to each other.
that's right. So
That's
the
neat.
thing I learned very quickly is if it's too complicated, the cards won't work. Like you have to kind of stick to a relatively small pool of
Mhm.
options to make those interactions even work. So it's been something I've been working on for like over 2 years.
Oh, wow.
And it's just a big challenge that I'm thinking a lot about at the moment to get it to work. But it's been fun. I've bought a lot of transparency paper, but
That's
yeah, I
fascinating.
don't know what will happen with it yet. So we'll see.
Well, no, that's really amazing because I think like as soon as you told me about it, it's like I could see it in my head how that would work and how it would, even just stuff like, in Keyforge, like everything has a unique weird name. Like I could see even the names changing depending on what overlay you put in or what transparency you put in. Like, Knights of, and then you put in a transparency that says, the Fire Realm, and now these are the Knights of the Fire Realm. They used to be the Knights of the Forest or whatever last
Exactly.
time
Yeah.
we played.
Yep.
Sorry, Erica's gone again. But I think there's a lot of really cool things that could happen from that. But you're right about the complexity. So the rules have to be super simple. The interaction of the cards has to be interesting, but not too complex or too like, um, not a lot of edge cases, I guess. Well, yeah, and I
Yeah.
think the idea of that the complexity is in the cards themselves is one that you're gonna have to really sort of agree that that's where it's gonna go. That's where it's
Yeah.
gonna go. And then all the
Yeah.
keywords and icons and stuff will bolster that.
Yeah. And it's a funny thing. Sometimes what happens is a card, you try and make this not happen, but sometimes cards will be created that are just stupid. So like
Like,
it's
don't
like,
work at all?
well, they work, but you would never use them. So like,
Oh, okay.
spend $10 to get $11 is probably not a good card, but it
Not a
might
good card.
be generatable, right? So it's
Right, right, right.
trying to find minimize that as much as you can. Yeah, is a challenge.
Or find ways to, like, get rid of them or use them as fodder for something else or whatever. Interesting
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Let's see. So everybody out there, if you're listening to the show, we are talking to Phil Walker Harding, who's telling us about some amazing stuff he has in the works, some games that he is coming out soon, like Platypus from Matago at Essen 2021, Snakes, which is currently out through Big Potato Games, and lots of other stuff that Mr. Walker Harding is responsible for. So if you have any questions while we're online, please do ask them in the chat. We'll get them up on the screen and let Phil answer them. Erica, do you have any questions for Phil that you've always wanted to ask but were too afraid to?
Always been able to ask, but too afraid to. I don't know about that.
Why
You
not
know what?
do it
Actually,
online in front of a million
you may as
people?
well do it in front of everybody.
Everybody.
Yeah, actually, you know what I'm really curious about, and this is both a combination of the ability to work full time, but also you're at home, you're a freelance full time. How have you kind of kept yourself going these last 2 years? Just because I mean, if you talk to most people, they'll tell you this was really rough. They had no creativity. You know what I mean? But you've kept it going, you've kept it moving. So I'm just curious, is it a routine that you're into? Are you good at like a self motivator? Is it the
Yeah.
cat?
The cat help. Hello,
Just
visitor
because if
cat.
there's anything that you are doing that seems to be helping you, odds are it might help someone else too.
Yeah, great question. Well, first of all, I'm not the best person to talk to on one level because I've completely not cracked how to work from home as a freelancer well, right? Like,
What do you mean by that? I'd love to know.
well, I feel like it's a it's a bit of a thing for all freelancers is figuring out how to do the work life balance because there's no physical boundary, right? So
Yes.
there's something about leaving an office and coming home. You've left your work at the office mentally somehow. And when you lose that, um, it's so much bigger than I think I thought. So, I mean, I have a little office at home and I try to work in the office and stuff, but it just never works at home. People knock on the door, you have to go do something outside. You think, well, I might as well go do the shopping now. And before you know it, your whole day is jumbled up into work and home all together.
Yeah.
So I, and especially during the pandemic, that got even weirder because you're at home anyway. So everything's at home. So yeah, I still need to find some better rhythms and patterns for that. I often find I'm pre-pandemic. I often found I would go to cafes to work or
Mhm.
try and work outdoors, just like find new places to work because there's just something about being at home that often couldn't get my creativity going. So yeah, I've not cracked that, and I am always trying new things and trying to ask people their advice because it is tough. Some people seem better at it than others, but in terms of just like productivity during the pandemic, I think I found I mean, I'm a bit of an introvert, and so lockdown is kind of an upside for me in a way. So, like, I kind of enjoyed the ability to just bunker down and go, okay, this whole week I can just do this
Just
game design.
focus.
Yeah. So I think that's how I did it. And I also think, you know, the pandemic made a lot of people obviously think about, what's important and what they want their life to be on some sort
Mhm.
of those big questions are just being asked. And I'm thinking, this is something I want to do. I want to do this and I want to be um, put something meaningful out. So I kind of got a bit of extra, I was spurred on a little bit by how serious everything was. And
Right.
I was kind of like, well, I want to this is what I want to be doing. I want to keep making good games. And I think it's a valuable thing to put into the world. And yeah, I tried to use it as a bit of a spur for that.
Yeah. Michael Eamon is saying it's hard for creative people because working, quote unquote, attack quotes there, Michael, is often staring at a wall thinking, and it looks similar to doing nothing, which is very much what my life looks like sometimes when my wife asks me to do something or, hey, you should go, do this thing that we meant to do. And it's like, but I'm working. Like, what do you mean you're
Oh,
working? You're just
that
sitting there staring at your computer screen.
that is so true. And so yeah, so tough. And I was asked to I did a little bit of consulting work for a company on a design and I was asked to kind of quote. And
Yeah.
I was like, how do I quote walking around for the next 2 weeks thinking about
Let
this?
your brain turn this over.
Yeah. It's like I'll be doing other things and thinking about it. So I guess I won't quote for that. But what if I'm sitting down with a notebook thinking, well, I guess I'll quote for that. Like there's just no way to
There really
put.
isn't.
And the other thing I'm learning is how you can get exhausted from thinking.
Oh my
Like
gosh, yes.
I am only just learning this, but sometimes I think, well, I haven't made a prototype or gone for a walk today. So why am I have no excuse to be tired. But I spent the whole day doing like deep game design thinking
Yeah.
and you get tired.
And you have nothing to
Yeah.
show for it because all of it was,
You get yeah,
proving yourself
instant.
wrong, right? In your
Yeah.
head.
It's a strange thing.
Matt Paquette says that he spent January to August this year just passing time at his desk. The very model of inefficiency. It was quite the slump. Actually, on mattpaquette.com, if you go to his website, he actually has a bunch of, the industry's leading graphic designers and illustrators talking about just that, their slumps and how they got through it or maybe how they didn't. So
Mm.
lots of good reading there just to kind of commiserate with people who are friends in the industry and say, oh, yeah, that was a tough time, right? Um, I had it kind of weirdly worse in some ways because both my kids were home, uh, schooling from home. That was not great, especially when they were having problems with technology and they'd run into the office. And I was trying to teach my own classes online because I was stuck here teaching. But then I would be doing my design work, and then they'd come in, and it's like it never ended. And you're right that leaving from the office, I leave all the worries about the office at the office. I was really good at that, and now I'm not so good. Now I'm just not so good. So it's
Yep.
tough. It is tough. Ah. But I think if anything, this has shown a lot of people. I think really, like you're saying, like what they want to do in the industry, in the business, in the hobby, where they want to be placed. Is this a full time thing? Is this something that they are, doing just casually, or is it like, hey, this is a serious deal, and I'm gonna make the most of it? So I think it's been a big wake up call for a lot of people in many aspects of their life, and it'll be great to see everybody pop out of this, um, hopefully in a better place. I think that's sort of the goal for everybody. Oh, Adam Young asks a question. He asks, "Are you still playing video games? What do you get excited to play now? Do video games affect your tabletop design at all?"
I am no. The short answer is not really. My video game tastes have completely like stagnated in 1992 or 3.
Street Fighter
So
1.
so I still play like NES games a lot.
Yeah.
Like that's just it's not a hobby I've like kept up with. Like as soon as the Nintendo 64 came out and everything went polygon 3D, I was just
Yeah.
like, I'm out. I'm out. I'm out.
I would say,
I don't
other
know.
than Zelda, you didn't miss out on too much.
Threw it on
Yeah.
the ground.
GoldenEye too,
Oh,
but
I mean,
I was not the
oh,
biggest fan of the
specifically for the
64.
64. Okay, yeah,
No, and I was
I
thinking the
rem-
64. That I'm
yeah,
like, those are the two games you had to play. Otherwise, you could have missed
yeah.
it.
I mean, I did play it a bit, but I remember the first time I played Mario 64. I'm walking along and there's a Goomba coming. I just walked around it.
Yeah, the
Right,
3D
right.
This
That's
is
good.
mapping.
not Mario.
Real.
I have to
Oh, never played
I
Galaxy.
live on a 2D platform. I can't walk around something.
So
Yeah.
I think it's actually interesting that you kind of got out when things got complex, because you might see a kind of comparator in the games that you make. Like I'm just looking at the shelf behind you, and they're like, there's a bunch of Phil games up there, of course, because it's your shelf. I'm thinking like Barn Park and all the games that you make. They're not super complex. They're deeply engaging, but they do it with like a minimal amount of tools.
They're
Like not a
accessible
lot of high
puzzles.
gloss, not a lot of, chrome on it, as people might say, not 3D polygons. They're like 2D polyominoes, right? Specifically with Baron Park.
I like that.
So
I think you've psychoanalyzed me perfectly there. That's why I left.
that is my
Too
job.
complicated.
It's
Yeah,
not appealing
partially.
when it turns from that level.
Well, I'm kind of the same way. Like I look at all these app-based games where, like each character is like 72 stats and 63 equipment slots. It's like, no, no, no. I want like 6 stats at the most and 2 equipment
Well,
slots
think of
and endless
two of the
amounts of
most.
Phoenix Downs. All the Phoenix Downs I can have.
I was
That's
gonna
what I
say
want.
two of the most popular games out there for the most part are like Among Us, very very simple and 2D,
Yeah.
right? And then Fortnite, not as 2D, but again keeps it very very straightforward to the point. Like my 6-year-old can play Fortnite. You know what I mean? Not
Mm.
great, but he plays actually fairly well. Just because again, it's very straightforward what you're doing, and obviously there's a bit of the 3D mapping throws them off, but it's funny to think that those are probably the most popular. And again, if you really think about it, they're quite simple and they're
Yeah.
very accessible.
And
Well,
Fortnite
yeah.
has the interesting thing, I think, of like the shrinking dome.
Yeah, the Eye of the Storm.
Yes, really pushes you inwards.
So
It's
it's
very
like
battle
there's an
royale.
end. Like
Yeah.
it's a short game, there's
Mhm.
like an end to it.
Yeah, that whole
And
idea is really, really great, actually. I think it's a wonderful
Yeah.
thing.
The time clock is a great idea.
Yeah.
The rest people would hide the whole game.
Matt is saying that he did the exact same thing. I think with like he was out of video gaming when it got really complex. Amy is saying that she really likes your striped sweater and shirt combo.
She's
There you
Oh,
go.
this
the
is
fashion
I should show you.
choices.
I should show you. So this cardigan has my wife
Oh,
made a
it's so
felt
cute.
cat for it.
You've worn that before to like a convention,
Yeah,
haven't you?
I think
Okay.
I had it at the gathering.
Okay, I was gonna
That's
say, I
One
very
year.
swear I've seen that, but like I
Yeah,
could
yeah,
be
yeah,
making it
yeah.
up.
And then Michael says Phil's gameplay blends so organically with the game theme, and that's not easy to pull off. And I think a lot of it is how you see scoring. That I think is a huge part of why the resonance is there thematically throughout the game, from the gameplay all the way to the scoring, because scoring really does drive gameplay in a lot of ways. When you think about reinforcement and all that kind of reward cycle, and the idea of I need to get this set of sushi. What type of sushi is this? Is it maki, or is it nigiri sushi, or is it, oh, I get the wasabi. What am I going to draft? All that kind of stuff. These are great decisions that I think um, just speak to people if they know what sushi is, right? So I think that's really cool. Ian O'Toole is saying hi, Erica and Sen. Hey, Phil. We really must bump into each other at a con someday, says Ian, who is also down under with you.
Yeah, I've never met Ian. It's crazy. We need to hang out.
Well, I mean, doesn't everybody from Australia know everybody else from Australia, Phil? Isn't that the way the world works?
Not quite.
Not quite. Okay.
Not quite.
Well, you know what? We have run out of time, everybody. Phil has talked our ear off. Of course, that's what he's here for, so that's very much allowed. If you want to talk Phil's ear off, you can contact him on Twitter at P Walker Harding. That is his name. Please wear it out. And if you're interested in seeing his ludography and all the stuff that is related to Phil Walker Harding, go to www.philwalkerharding.com. That's how you know it's official. It's like his name. He paid for that. That's how awesome it is. If you want to reach Erica, where are you on Twitter?
At Erica Buiris.
There you go. And you can find me at Senfeng Lim. Lara will be back in the coming months. She might be here for some shows in between now and then. We'll see.
Maybe November, December, maybe.
Yeah, because living arrangements are changing and moving and all this kind of stuff for her move back to Ontario. So if you want to reach out to her, you can reach her at TT Void on Twitter. And as always, we are all available at Meeple Syrup on Twitter. If you want to support the show, you can, lend your ducats to us at www.patreon.com/maple we still need to put some items in the work for this year. I have some ideas. I was talking to Brian last week about some stuff, and we'll get some things out there that will. You're welcome, Amy. That will help the design community again and again and again. That's we want to make resources that kind of last.
That's our hope.
That's our hope, and we need to find some places to put these things eventually.
And we should start voting too on some of our new infographics. I know there's some chat on like what we might want to do, but we should start doing a couple.
We should probably just do them. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. So Phil, I told you at the start of this whole thing that you'd have to give some final advice. So, what would you like to tell the people out there?
I think something I find I often say to people who want to start designing anyway is, I do think to not wait to get your first design into the world, even if that means releasing it in some really simple way like print and play or print on demand or just for free with your friends. Just having a game beyond you is the best learning experience. And I think being too precious about your first game design is an easy thing to do, but I think, let it out and see how people respond. Because I just think your biggest teacher is that feedback you get from players.
For sure. Yeah. It's an interesting thing. Erica, do you remember that at Funko, every designer has to produce a game?
I mean, they have a giant collective where they dump all their ideas into. What do you mean?
No. But each one of them has to be like the lead producer and like has to do all the
manufacturing
quotes and all. Yeah, exactly. Right. So each of them can talk about it with some experience behind the talk, right? So I think that's a
Wow.
really valuable thing. And Phil, you're exactly right. Like, get that game out there, whatever form it is, printer play, itch.io,
Andrew says
tabletop
that's not
simulator,
true.
whatever. Oh, okay. So
Maybe
thank
it
you,
was
Andrew.
just good talk.
Yeah, maybe it was just the people we talked to had done that. Okay. Or maybe it used to be. I don't know. We'll see.
Could have been like pre-Funko. Could have been like Force Present, and then they
Maybe that was it. I don't know.
Because I was gonna say I never heard that from a Funko person, but there were people there before it was Funko.
True. So maybe I'm just misremembering things. That happens when you get to be old like I am. Thanks, Phil, says Michael. Thanks, Erica with a C. Erica with a Eric K. Oh, I get it. I see what you're doing. Zakir says, thanks for the great interview. Lots of appreciation for you three. And yeah, that's it. That's about it. So great, everybody. We'll see you next week when we don't know who we're going to have on the show yet. We will work
we've
on
got
that.
a couple blip spots we're working on. Everything else is kind of booked
up.
up.
Yeah, right. If you have anybody you want to see on the show, anybody you want to hear from, designers, other people in the industry, topics you want us to talk about that we can then find an expert to bring in, let us know on Meeple Syrup Shop Talk. That's on Facebook at Meeple Syrup Shop Talk. That's where you can generally find Lara, myself, and Erica any day of the week. We hang around there quite a bit. And yeah, get your thoughts out there, let your wishes be known, and we'll try to do our best over this next season to get some of those in there and progressing on to the next season once January rolls around. So on that note, we're going to say goodbye to Phil. It is probably time for him to eat lunch or something. It's like 1 o'clock.
Go back to work.
Yeah, get back to work, Phil. crack the Indiana Jones whip. There you go. See, we have to make it go full circle. All right, everybody.
Well,
thank you very much. Yeah, anytime, Phil. It was great to see you again, buddy. See you later.
You too.